Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on the challenges with experimenting with a democratized work platform as part of the Global Forum's Democratizing Work global event. I'm Bill Skelly. I'm the independent chair of this morning's session. And I suppose the subject matter we're talking about, it could be like viewing the cosmos. You either sum it up in 30 seconds or you spend your entire life trying to explain its intricacies. Well, we don't have a lifetime. We have just under 90 minutes to cover this session. So let's begin by introducing our panel. Perhaps Annabelle, if I go to you first.
Thanks, Bill. I'm Annabelle Lambert. I have been working with this organisation called Ethos on and off for the last 20 years. I am a full-time mother as well, 2 kids, 12 and 16. This has been a journey really into the future of work for the last 20 plus years. For me, I am all about people, all about their behaviour, why they do stuff, why they don't do stuff, and hoping to bring more individual empowerment to the world. That's my mission.
Excellent. Thank you, Annabelle. Sara, if I come to you next.
So I am Sara, about 24 years old, so definitely haven't got the 20 years experience of being in the workplace, but not to make Annabelle feel old at all. I realise that maybe not
Sarah.
So I've been working with Ethos since the beginning of the year after being on universal credit and really just struggling to find work. Previously, I just finished my master's in modern contemporary art, which I was really focused on not just pretty pictures, but the contemporary state of capitalism and accelerationism and everything like that. So all of this is very close to my heart.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Sara. And Rob.
So one of the co-founders of Ethos, 3 boys pretty much grown up, 2 have left home, 1 just about leaving home. If you go back years and years, I'm a technologist, but then a management consultant. So 21 years ago, I was a consultant in EY, and I spent with Annabelle and another guy, Tony, really looking at the future of work and organizational governance and new forms. So what really gets me out of bed is terribly complex problems, and being a sort of eternal optimist, what might technology do to enable more democratic societies, including organizations, of course, and governments. So I'm one of those people Bill talks about that actually will talk and think about it forever and never stop and never have any answers.
Okay, I'm sure you've got some answers there, Rob, which we'll explore as we go through the session. And finally, our technical moderator for today is Joelle. Is there anything you'd like to say just by way of introduction?
Hey, I'm Joelle, 25 years old and from London. I also joined Ethos about a year ago after being on universal credit myself. And my background's in chemistry, so finished my bachelor's in chemistry 2020, last year. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, welcome one and all. If I could just remind everyone who's speaking that this is a kind of global forum that we're reaching out to. So if there are things which you think are specific to the UK or things like universal credit, I suppose, might not be particularly clear to someone from another area or another continent. And so if you feel as you go through things that you might want to explain some stuff a little bit more, that's probably going to be helpful for many of those that are joining from other areas. And if I spot anything, I might try and elaborate on those issues as well. Okay, so let's kick off then. Let's get a little bit of background to the work that Ethos have been doing around the Democratized Work Platform. Annabelle, perhaps you'd like to kind of talk us through some of that.
Thanks, Bill. So this all started 20 plus, 21, 22 years ago, when a small collection of people, Rob, myself and 1 or 2 others, decided that maybe we could do an experiment into the future of work and actually approach the way we engage with our work slightly differently, allowing a bit more individual empowerment about what I'm doing and why I want to do it, and having some purpose and meaning about bringing about some social value, as well as having flexibility and having fun, and just doing things quite differently. Gave ourselves permission to do that, and have done that ever since. And for a long time, our work system, built on various things, we have been experimenting, and we try, we fail, we try, we fail. But there are some bits that we have retained and continue to improve, which I'm sure we'll come to later, about how an individual should engage with the work that they're doing, and how that can give them more empowerment. But so 20 years ago, we started this experiment. About maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it was our best kept secret. We were doing it with ourselves. We were a collection of, I don't like to say old people, but people who could afford, who could afford to join in, because there's always an investment. There had always been an investment in what we were doing to allow, the transition from being a sad banker to becoming somebody who wants to bring about some really social greatness through unleashing data that gives us more information to improve the world. That kind of transition, which can be quite different for people and actually quite empowering. So that's the kind of thing that we've been doing. About 5 years ago, we really must get some younger people into our space. And then a year ago, as Joelle mentioned, we actually said, okay, we really need to do this now. So we approached the market. We found a number of people, Joelle included, to try an experiment to see whether we could get young people, who potentially couldn't afford to do this, into our work system. So we did that. Within about a month of that happening, the government, in the face of the pandemic, and through the furlough scheme, introduced what's in the UK is called the Kickstart scheme, which is about supporting 16 to 24-year-olds through work experience for 6 months, which they would pay at a minimum wage. And the end result was hopefully the young people would get enough experience to then transition into some sustainable income. So we looked at this and thought, fantastic, we could really benefit from viewing it as a basic income for individuals. We took on 30, we doubled the size of our organisation, took on 30 young people, and Sara and Joelle are just 2 of those people who are still with us after that journey. It's been it has basically brought our work system front and centre for us as an organisation, and actually proven that with some further improvement, innovation around the economics, etc., that this could be a very powerful thing, and we're now taking it to the rest of the world, is where we're going. So that's our story.
Okay, and thanks very much, Annabelle. Rob, I'll come to you in a second, but as we're just kind of clarifying there, then, so the work system that you have has been developed within the company ethos, and that is a sort of a small to medium enterprise. You see, it's round about kind of 60 odd people in it. So that's the sort of rough numbers who are operating across this new kind of democratized work platform. Rob, do you want to kind of maybe expand on some of the themes that Annabelle's kind of introduced there as to, what is this way of working? Why is it labeled democratized?
So the experimentation, I think, is a key part of it, and I would say, after 21 years of doing it, we haven't arrived anywhere. It's an experiment as much as it was at the beginning. So you won't find a holacracy rule book where we've sort of started off with a new form of rules and governance. If you go back 20 years ago, we started with a blank sheet of paper. Sort of the hypothesis was, what if everything is wrong in an organization, and you could kind of start again? So we sort of reintroduced stuff into what we're now calling the work platform, that we found necessities. Because and we've done this, you put 150 people in a room and you say, look, we've got a problem, and you'll get a lot of voices, and you'll get about 200 opinions, and it'll kind of, go everywhere, and you'll never get consensus. So I guess as a geek, I want to maybe start off with defining how I view technology as part of the system of work. So anything that might be a hammer or a pitchfork, you could view as something that augments people as a piece of technology. And then when you're kind of looking at a democratic workspace, if you kind of just leap forward to the subject we're talking about, our people when they come into organizations are mediated by lots of different forms of technology, whether that is organizational governance, whether you're in a company that happens to be a cooperative or a charity that's a member organization, or a company limited by shares, or something that you create without nation states in mind, like a distributed autonomous organization, a DAO, who's governed by just electronic rules on a blockchain, or the tax system, or money. When you talk about a democratic workspace, you're talking about the sociology, collectively, of how people interact with technology. So we talk about a peer-to-peer work system where an individual. So first rule of ethos is sort of individuals and organizations engage with one another as adult to adult, rather than sort of parent-child, rather than in a hierarchical fashion where you've got some implicit power structure. So, you would like to engage as Joel and the work that he's doing in the organization. Now, that is an idealized version, but if you're working on a project or a product, then a small group of people are going to have to come together and agree direction in some way. And we are big proponents of Agile Scrum, which is first popularized with technology developers, but it essentially kind of looks at what you're doing as infinite lists of things to do, for which you want to chunk that up in very small sprints to kind of get going on one thing and then another. So I think first principles, to start off with, is peer-to-peer, adult to adult. But even when you introduce money to an adult to adult conversation, you completely swerve the asymmetry. Who's got the money? Who doesn't have the money? Then you're on to subjects like Annabelle opened with universal basic income, the right for a job for life, and so where does the money come in? Anyway, Bill, I could go on forever, as you probably know, but is that enough for an intro?
Yeah, I think again, it's developing kind of some of those themes, and there are a number that I would kind of want to return to. I suppose the kind of hub of some of these things around what makes this approach special or different, in terms of it being something which is more democratic and more controlled by its members, rather than necessarily some kind of power hierarchy, and exploring the issues of how you make that work. That democracies have rules, otherwise there'd be anarchies. So there has to be some framework of rules around them, and how that has developed over time in the ethos experiment, as you've described. But perhaps before we do that, Sara, if I bring you in as someone who has new first-hand experience of this way of working, and perhaps maybe to help others understand, say about what your expectation was, and then what you're actually experiencing as part of this working platform.
Yeah, so it was actually really interesting, as I didn't have too much of an expectation, because it was sort of my first, I want to say, I don't like the word proper job, but it's sort of my first job that wasn't within sort of the hospitality, retail, etc. So I think Annabelle and Rob have actually mentioned this a few times, that they didn't, when they were bringing young people in, they were expecting there to be a learning curve, which is what they've experienced with people who came in who may have had a long career beforehand about getting used to the ethos culture, whereas they found that young people like myself and Joelle, we were like, well, this is fine. We haven't got any experience to go back on. So what we're really doing is just enjoying ourselves and actually just being treated like humans, which is such a bizarre concept, I know. But I think that's like the benefit of like the peer-to-peer system, and what I personally like, because I think I had such a fear growing up about my first job, just because I really don't like hierarchy and I don't like being dismissed, and I like being actually talked to like a person. And I know that I have skills and I have thoughts that can contribute to various projects. So actually having this sort of peer-to-peer thing where you're talked to like a person and your points and values are actually, well, your points and ideas are valued is really useful. Yeah, so I guess like my expectations, like I said, I didn't really have anything to expect, but now that I have experienced this, I would have a lot of trepidation going into other jobs if I wasn't going to be treated like this.
Okay, so there's something very valuable about that, as you know, the transactional analysis that our relationship that Rob sort of described in terms of adult to adult and being treated like an adult or treated like a human even, that you kind of really value in this work experience. Annabelle, if I could perhaps come back to you, what would you say are some of the building blocks of this platform? You know, what are the things which, when you put them, you know, together, gives you this actual way of working?
So part of that is, you know, front and center is what, you know, what is called a value exchange, which it currently sort of reifies itself in a document. But it's a journey, it's a conversation, it's an ongoing conversation with an individual about what they are doing in relation to the work that they are engaging with through the Ethos platform, with foundations of, you know, how we want to behave really as a culture. So like Sarah's talking about, you know, permission, you have permission to do stuff. Get on with stuff. We want people to have permission. We also want people to understand the responsibility that comes with that. So there's a whole load of ways in which we work culturally, but sort of how we engage with an individual is founded in a moment in time where we capture our conversation in a value exchange, which details lots of different things from, you know, what are the outcomes we're going to deliver together? What does that mean? We're then going to do from a, you know, excuse the consulting speak, but deliverables, you know, so what more detail as to how we're going to do that. We never let the value exchange run for more than 3 months. So there's a constant convening to ensure that we're still on track, that we're reviewing, that we even take the moment to look back as well and capture the value through narrative of talking to individuals, getting people one has worked with to talk about how that has been in a positive way. It's not a 360 review. It's not about you can improve if you do this. It's not about that. It's about what great things have we done together and how has it been. So yeah, those, Bill, are sort of key really to how this
sure
works.
And I think perhaps just dwelling on that tool, if you like, the value exchange kind of tool, because it kind of strikes me, having kind of seen how that operates, that, you know, those listening might be kind of really interested in this as a kind of key component of producing a democratized platform, insofar as every kind of work area tends to have some kind of performance review mechanism within it. Now, some of those are linked to pay or remuneration. They tend to be linked to things such as discipline. So if you're not performing, it's a means by which you exit the organization, by which you're made redundant or fired. And they tend to be very much about the hierarchy asking what you are doing as part of your contribution to the workplace, or, as I say, recognizing what you're not doing. Whereas this value exchange, it seems to be trying to turn that on its head and be more about asking the individual what they feel their contribution is, and discussing a kind of mutually beneficial meeting of the individual's desire to contribute to the workplace and how that contribution can be maximized for the benefit of whatever the particular endeavor is that the organization is trying to achieve. And coming back, as opposed to some of those things that Sara and Rob have said about it being that therefore a more adult conversation, and one which is led by the individual rather than necessarily led by the organization. And that feels like quite an important piece of the puzzle of the kind of jigsaw. Either Annabelle, do you want to say a little bit more about how that came about, or how it's been developed, and then maybe I'll go to kind of Rob for more of that, and then hear from Sara about what it's like to receive one, or what it's like to be part of one of those value exchanges. But anything else you want to add to to developing the richness of this understanding as to what this is trying to do?
I think when we started, it was very much a, from what I've always considered a common sense perspective, which is, this is what I can and want to do. How can I engage with at Ethos at that time to create some value that's going to do something good in the world? That's how it was. And it was very, this is brilliant. I can come and I can do whatever I want. This is about me. And that was fine. But actually, there are flaws in that. Because what we learned was, of course, you need to have some structure, some support, some mentoring and help and engagement and tempo and things that go on in work to actually make that happen. So I think that's been a key learning for me anyway. And I think what's come out sort of most recently with all this is actually, this is about enabling people to succeed. This is not, if you take the stance, okay, well, this is an individual, I want to help them, the organization wants to help them, they want to help themselves, so how do we make that happen? This is not about, well, you haven't done that, therefore you have failed. It's like, okay, that's happened, but now what are we going to do about it? And it's not about discarding folks, like you're describing, Bill, where it's, you're reprimanded and you're out. I mean, we don't want to own anybody in Ethos, and people, we see ourselves as a place to transition. People come, they love it, and then they leave, and that's fine. But we want to have a long-term relationship as well with individuals. We're a network really of people just doing some good stuff. That's at its basis level, it feels quite organic like that. It's like problems arise, there are people who want to solve them, we come together, we work out how we're going to do that, create through Agile Scrum that Rob was describing, through that kind of process, and build value exchanges based on the outcomes that problem needs to have solved.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Annabelle. Rob, if I come to you then, just to maybe sort of develop more of that, and some really helpful questions and comments from Ruth on the chat bar, which I know you've been responding to, but perhaps in terms of just developing those themes a bit further.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff, and I encourage everybody to kind of write questions, because often the session is as much about dialogue, but we have become more and more. So although it was set up 20 years ago, just exploring the raw mechanisms for which technology and the internet could enable more democratic organizations in a sort of a slightly sort of utopian view of what the internet and technology might enable, and a more focused last 11 years that we have been running the Ethos brand as a more focused experiment. And we sort of this trial and fail kind of approach has kind of led us to, and this has been bottom up, because it has not been without lots of tensions, frustrations, stresses, strains, and part of being a passenger on this journey is about accepting that it doesn't always go right. In fact, sometimes it feels like it doesn't often go right. But as I was saying to Ruth, we're focused on three themes currently that it has become quite easy to get to that answer, because this sort of human-centric approach, peer-to-peer, adult to adult, the answer to that in terms of the organization's mission, purpose, values is it's about people, silly, and what might our organization's purpose be and mission if it was intrinsically, inherently about people, therefore about community, because people are social animals, and about place or planet, because people have to exist in one location at a time until we fully upload our brains and dispense with our human bodies. So this is sort of evolution, not a revolution. I come back to my point that it's not a rule book that somebody's written and then tries to get everybody to align to. And the units of democracy that I think matter most, just to sort of unpick ethos a little bit more, Bill, is at a project or a product level. So we're actually not just one entity. We've got 7 or 8 entities that the ethos sort of culture is operating within. One of those, Bill is chairing, is called Team Police, which is about well-being for the workforce. So officers and staff of 300,000 people in the United Kingdom's police force, and that is currently set up as a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee. It's on a path to becoming a new registered charity from a charity within the police. And the unit of democracy is Bill and the team in Team Police, or in smart cities with a people counting product of how those different teams are working together. So coming back to Sarah's point, Annabelle and I's life in ethos as 2 of the co-founders are not sitting on a board trying to command and control all this lot. In fact, we spend our time trying to get rid of the governance of a board so that actually the board doesn't have to do anything other than a minimum legal and fiduciary kind of thing, and it's fairly impotent in terms of governance. But what our day job is, Annabelle and I, is working as product owners, so splitting a role, and we work with the rest of the team to look at recruiting lots of young people into the work platform for organizations all over the world, but mainly in the UK at the moment, to benefit from young adults first into work, to try and help us shape democratic workplaces where we have voice of young people. Now that's a project that we personally care an awful lot about, and what we strive to do within the team, having been around a bit, is make young leaders by young people for young people. But that doesn't mean that you just put young people in a room and then leave them alone and they get on with it. We're trying to bring this collective wisdom, old people, young people, together, and use the blank sheet of paper that young people provide us, the enthusiasm, the talent, the energy, to then build the democratic workplaces of tomorrow, with councils, with businesses, with charities, with anybody who's interested in using this experiment to almost like a change that's outside in. So you're never going to change Barclays Bank or ABN AMRO.
Before you go into that, Rob, before you go into the sort of product and system, which I think is definitely a direction we'll take over the next kind of hour, as well as dealing with some of the other issues that are raised. Because I do want to come to Sara about the value exchange, because I do feel that that's a kind of one of the central blocks of building the kind of platform that then allows you to kind of move on to the, if you like, product and service and change element of it. So I'll definitely come back to and pick up that conversation around doing. But if I come to you, kind of Sara, about what is your experience of value exchange? What does that mean as a sort of as a method of engaging with the organization?
Oh, I think I kind of want to go back to one of Annabelle's points, and that is how the organization wants to help you, and that this is a value exchange. It's not just about what I'm going to do for the organization. It's not just my outcomes and deliverables. We actually have a box on the value exchange that says, what's Ethos going to do for you? And that is quite an interesting idea into sort of the various power balances that within Ethos itself, because it's really important when you are working to be able to question the organization that you're working with and to be able to understand what you want from it, and like purely from like, you know, just these are the skills I want to develop, this is where I want this so I can get onto this at a different point. But also it's just about just like knowing that it creates a better equality between you and the organization. It's not this sort of up down bottom up, it's not that sort of hierarchy, because actually you're kind of questioning it. And I know, I suppose in terms of power, I think Rob can easily confirm that I'm more than happy to tell him that I disagree with him or anything like that. And that's again part of that value exchange. It's this idea of what it's like to that those sort of power balances of making sure you're getting enough from the organization and making sure that it's like, for me, it's so important that it aligns with my values and things like that. But I suppose my other thing I want to bring up about the value exchange is that it's probably given me the biggest confidence boost than anything else has done. So being on universal credit, so people from not the UK, universal credit is kind of a monthly stipend allowance of money for basically if you don't have any money coming in. So I was on it because I couldn't get a job, even though I've sort of graduated from a Russell Group university with a master's distinction. I knew I was like a perfectly capable person, but pandemic and everything like that, I didn't get a job, and it can be a really quite disheartening experience. And I think a lot of people coming onto it from universal credit, or just young people who aren't able to get work, actually then having this sort of value exchange where you're having all of your achievements listed down and actually having the chance to go over what you have, the benefit that you've brought to the company. And this is from like people who you work with, and that can be from like Rob, co-founder, to the other young leaders. Massively quite like a confidence boost. I think people are naturally quite humble and insecure, and I don't think that's just applicable to young people. So yeah, I think that actually being told that you're bringing value is quite an impactful thing.
And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I'd welcome your kind of view on it, was that the value exchange kind of starts with the individual being very, if you like, introspective, something around their kind of guiding why. And, so as Anita has put in there, this issue of self. So you have to really kind of reflect on what your driving why is and what you are seeking as an individual to do. Now, after 30 or more years in the workplace, some of those reflections, even for those that have done that, are still quite difficult, as you might not necessarily have been pushed to understand what your why is and how you fit as self within an organization. So how was that for you, as this being your first role, your first major kind of job, and at the outset you're asked, so why do you want to do this? What is your driving why?
It's almost a bit of a relief, because I think when you're applying for all these jobs, you're kind of prepared to give up a little bit of yourself. You're prepared to maybe bend your morals and values a little bit. You're prepared to not be treated that great, and actually having that consideration of like, oh, what is actually driving me? What am I passionate about? Why? What am I like? What is my why? What is my story? is such a useful thing, and it's sort of like it genuinely is a relief, because I was like applying for all these jobs, I was like, oh, this company is a bit gross for various reasons. Oh, they're not going to pay me that much. Whereas actually money isn't even that important of a thing for me. I want a decent living wage, but for me it was always about having better social impact. It was about doing something that I care about and being creative. I can see Rob putting his hand up, so I haven't got much more to say. So yeah, like I say, it was just a massive relief to be able to, have my why as such an important factor of the work that I do.
Okay, Rob, yeah.
Well, so alongside all the failures, it may be the deepest joy in working for Ethos is the just being very unconventional about how we engage with people, and particularly that, what's your purpose, finding your why. But so whether you're a chief constable or chief executive or general or young person who's not got a degree, never been near the workplace, engaging in a conversation with someone, a one-to-one, through a process, through electronic mediation, about them as an individual is a joy that never dissipates. It is human-centric. So when we talk about democracy, we might think about nation-state democracy or parliamentary democracy, where we vote for politicians and then we let them rule us, and we call it democracy. But actually, maybe we should talk about human centricity. So making the workplace human-centric, because many, and I'm not an academic, many scientific studies really underpin the results of giving a human a sense of empowerment, a sense of them engaged in the workplace. We're going to do a presentation next week to 190 lower six people about surveys of employee engagement in the workplace, with like 80% disengagement. People are really not being great productivity units because they just don't like their work. And another way of looking at democratic workplace is the voice of individuals. And I don't mean post-it pads in a wooden suggestion box on the side of a factory floor. I mean conversations. I mean really engaging in the why, as you say, Bill, behind. So sorry, I had to get excited about that point, because
that's okay.
It's
a joy. You're welcome to be excited. Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, I'll come back to Annabelle, and I'll sort of exercise chairman's role to sort of summing up some part of that, in that one of the ways in which we describe the kind of well-being or wellness approach is the integration of physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual well-being, and the spiritual side being that connection to the why, whether that's your personal connection to the organization's why and how those are very much matched and aligned. And if you get that one right, then physically, psychologically, and emotionally, as an individual, you tend to flourish a lot better. If you get it wrong, then all of those things suffer. So a real kind of step forward in terms of workplace and that human-centric, approach is one that I think Ethos can be proud of. So, Annabelle, before I move on to coming back to some of the issues Rob was discussing around what Ethos does and how it tries to bring about change, if we stick with how Ethos does it. So we've talked about the kind of building block of the value exchange, but there's something about how communication takes place within the organization and across the organization that is also, I think, part of this ongoing experiment. And I wondered if you might be able to kind of talk to us a little bit about how Ethos organizes the communication.
Who's that to? Oh, Annabelle, sorry.
Annabelle, sorry.
You can take it, Rob, if you want to. I guess, it's really, I mean, the other magic thing about us is that we're a virtual organisation. So we don't exist anywhere other than online. But I think we've always had a respect for, the requirement for face to face, and we've missed that like everybody else. Although other things have just, life's gone on as usual in the face of the pandemic. But I think what's key with communication is sort of a regularity of coming back to the conversation. So that happens, at our level. So with an individual, that is, get involved in our regular weekly tempos in the spaces that are relevant to you. So that can be at whole organisation level, it can be at work level, and at individual level, whether that's value exchange or whether that's well-being, on a regular turn. We have an insistence, really, if there's any rules that we have, it's like we need to maintain that regular communication. Is that what you're referring to, Bill? Just checking that's where you were going with that.
Yes, I suppose you've experimented with different communication platforms that have allowed that virtual opportunities for people to communicate in a way, I suppose, coming back to some of the benefits that Sara has identified, that are not overly moderated, insofar as that they are not overly hierarchically controlled, and that therefore the levels of power sharing or organic transfer of communication can take place. So there was that sort of thing. I wondered if there's more about that. And Rob will come to you in a second.
Go on.
Because I think there's a techno geek part in this, so I feel a tech interruption. So we've all been quite passionate proponents of expunging emails, which I think we've successfully done internally in terms of how we work as an organization, because we can kind of get this sort of many to many spam I used to work in an organization where it was psychologically damaging to look at my email in the morning, because it was just and it was just like so we use Google a lot for calendaring, for collaborative docs, for implementing many of our processes, but we also use Slack, and the structure of Slack is, as Annabelle said, divided into project areas and communities of practice or general discussions on things of interest. So that can involve external people. It certainly involves all internal people. And if people write emails to one another internally, we discourage it. We don't shoot people, but we discourage it. We kind of like to shoot them, but we're not. We're very. So I think from a knowledge work perspective, if you think of the work that all of us do in Ethos, it is not physical with our hands, it's with our brains. It's kind of what we might call knowledge work. So we've kind of been successful in making that transition away from email, but I think that as we grow and as we kind of look at the next 20 years for us, we're sort of embarking on a experiment to look at more technology to automate processes. So we have been really stressed with the high level of effort it takes to do exactly what Sarah said. I see you having a hand up, to do value exchange, to do value recognition, to do work mentoring, to do well-being mentoring, and there's a lot of opportunities for the next 20 years to use technology to automate the roles of knowledge workers. You might think of it as an industrial revolution for knowledge workers. So I'm going to stop because Sarah's got a hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, oh, sorry, Bill.
No, on you go. I'll carry on, Sarah.
I suppose on the email thing, when I first joined, I was told, do whatever you want, don't ask permission, apologise later. Except I did get told by Annabelle, don't send me emails. So, it's quite serious. We don't like emails. But I think, so when we have all these, trying to automate different processes and things like that, what is actually really important to also remark is we're really still focused on this human touch about things and actually having the person at the center of it. Like emails are quite, well, I'm sure everyone who ever has had an email knows that it's not that enjoyable to get emails, and it's quite a depersonalized thing. I know Sunita has said in the Q&A about community stuff, and I just want to touch on it briefly now, is just keeping, when we have all these different processes and trying to automate it, knowledge work, etc., that we're still trying to keep this sort of human touch of it all, because we do have a really excellent work culture, atmosphere, community, whilst also trying to get rid of things like emails. And I think they do quite balance together. That's just sort of the quick point I wanted to make.
Okay.
Bill, can I just add? I think the other thing that goes with that, and the reason for sort of disliking email is very closed, and we're a very working out loud is a term that has a specific meaning, but we've adopted it and made it our own in a certain way. It really fits with our culture of, anybody can help anybody in this network, and if you work out loud, you will convene people around your problem at whatever, whether it's, I don't know how to use Google Drive, or whether it's, I want to, change the world by introducing some mega environmental improvement through doing this, that, and the other. So I think that's quite important as well. With our use of technology, it's like let's get it out there, let's share it, because actually you get a better response, because you will engage with people who want to engage with you.
Yeah. So I think that it is, in terms of the kind of fundamental kind of building blocks of what makes the kind of democratized nature of the kind of workplace, how the workplace communicates is feels like it's certainly one of those central ones, and the ongoing kind of experiment around how to make that in a very useful tool, but without it then becoming an inhibiting tool, I think is ongoing. But there's certainly lots of good experience, and people have spoken about that. I mean, I suppose the inherent problems with some of the technology that we've kind of created around us over the last 20, 30 years is that it allows for a kind of proliferation of requests, almost exponentially, and that's what we're trying to kind of see. So if the days of when you didn't have email where somebody physically had to come to your door, then nowadays every morning at 9 o'clock there's a queue of 200 people. They're virtual because they've all left messages, and they're all just sort of and most of those messages aren't for you, they were for somebody else. It's just that the virtual nature of it all has allowed for that proliferation, whereas we, as Sara has said, are trying to maintain a sense of community, with the ability to still operate in a kind of very kind of coherent way. Okay, so we've covered kind of a bit about a couple of areas, important areas about the how. How does things go? I'm going to kind of move on in just a minute to the kind of what, and some of that will help to answer some of the questions that have been raised around what change do you want to see, how is Ethos trying to deliver that. But before I do it, Joel, whilst you are our kind of technical whiz moderator, I just wondered, you are also part of the Ethos organization. You've listened to the conversation that Sara, Rob and Annabelle have been having. Is there anything that you would like to add at this point to any of those topics that we've been discussing?
Not at the moment, no. Nothing to
Okay.
add on top of that.
Yeah.
I'll put my hand up if I do. No.
Okay, splendid. In which case then, let's move on in these kind of next 40 minutes then, I suppose, or next 35 or so, to give time for a bit of a summary, to what Ethos does then, and why we feel that is something that's different and is something to help perhaps bring about this nirvana world of a democratized way of working. So Rob, perhaps if I go to you first, do you want to say, you had already started talking about, how do you go out there, how do you make changes, how do you change Barclays, for example, and so on. But do you want to kind of pick that thread up and start to?
So do you want me to answer the question in terms of the breadth of Ethos, or young leaders, which how do I take it?
If we want to start with the breadth, so people get a flavour for it, and then I think young leaders is a particularly important part of what is happening now. And so perhaps if we do it in that order, then that might.
So top down, we work in three across three themes. One of which is place, and it has been a really high tech area. So it was called smart cities, but it sort of graduated to be place, and it encompasses everything from smart, parkings, air quality sensors, counting people, kind of looking at technology in cities, to climate change and a venture in there called Ethos Wilder, which is about rewilding the countryside, and all different facets of business models, and how people might engage in rewilding. So place is a key area, and then secondly, well-being. So we started a venture 11 years ago, which was sort of like many heard of sort of Team GB. It was for the UK military, a company called Team Army, charitable venture looking at well-being for the armed forces. And essentially the model was, how do we fundraise for well-being for the armed forces staff? So a lot of stuff on well-being, and the Team Police venture is part of that well-being thread. And then the third one, which is really the central focus of Annabelle and I's interest as sort of being around, working together for over 20 years, is the future work itself. And we've done lots of ventures to sort of look at disrupting the work system for service personnel, for the construction industry, for supermarkets, for to kind of look at propagating democratic workplaces in today's language, as far and wide as we can. The big thing that we're doing at the moment is a project called Young Leaders. So I've started that. So that's the top. So I'll finish with the Young Leaders, and just say that before the pandemic, because Sunita's question, I think I'd love to have a crack at answering. But Sunita's question is, what would you like to focus on in the post-COVID time for creating inclusive organizations and healthy communities? So so that's kind of the motivating bit to finish the answer on. In the pandemic, we, as Annabelle said in the intro, started recruiting lots of young people, and found that actually a couple of things. Number one, that young people were a lot easier to work on with the vision of democratic workplaces than old people, because you don't have to unlearn 30 years of workplace practice and experience. You have blank sheets of paper, and actually the ethos work system is much more intuitive for a younger person to grasp than it is somebody who's been in the workforce 20 or 30 years. So that was the first point. The second point is one around a sort of transition to full employment, or a right to work that involves basic income and money. In that, the way that we've created jobs since the East India Trading Company a few hundred years ago was, from an economic position, you create a role and then you create substitutable labor. What if you actually had a system where you could create meaningful and purposeful work and some basic income from that, and then move to sustainable economics from a position of strength, rather than work being a commodified thing that we do. And so what Ethos is doing in Young Leaders is partnering with all sorts of organizations to bring our work platform, which is increasingly a digitally enabled thing, process automation and all the rest of it, to scale through organizational partnerships. So we are working with businesses and charities and governments and the police force to look at, for young people particularly, work as an enabler for not just democratic workplaces, but for value in the community, of actually giving as much work as possible for young people, particularly those out of work and those furthest from labour systems. So that really is mission at the moment. I don't know, Annabelle, you probably any crack at that, or anything else to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so there's this, I suppose, kind of varied mission then, which is to influence the kind of world of work through a new design of what that appreciation of work actually looks like. So as you said, it rather than necessarily starting with an economic model and then hiring into it, it's looking at the person, hiring them in, and then developing them into an economic model. Is that kind of what you...
Correct, 100%, yeah. Very simple, but very difficult to achieve.
And very different, yeah.
And very different.
So
very radical.
Sara then, is kind of part of that. How does it feel to be part of that, and what do you see as some of the things that are going to have to change in order for that to become a sort of scalable or replicable model?
I suppose the problem of making it scalable at the moment is we kind of do need something like a universal basic income. We need something that allows people to not focus on the economic side of things straight away and be able to focus on an appreciable work is actually looking like. I think that over the pandemic, it's really shown that there is a lot of technological poverty, and there is also problems with people not being able to work from home. There's so many different little elements, and I feel like it is such an important idea that we focus on work rather than just the economic value. But unfortunately, it's quite like a privileged position to be able to take at the moment, and then bringing in these sort of things like universal basic income, actually allowing people to have money to survive and not be concerned about just where they're getting their next meal from, how they're paying their rent, is such an important thing.
Yeah, so it does kind of, I suppose, feel to me, looking at how things are as we come out of the pandemic. So for here in the UK, we do see news reports of there being 1 million plus vacancies within the kind of workplace. But I suppose my kind of take on that is that those are kind of almost like worker ant vacancies. They are the old model of vacancies. It's come and do this job for 10 hours a day or however many hours a day. You will get paid for it. Yes, that's very true, and the work will be of economic value. But it is a million miles away from what we have been talking about for the last hour. It doesn't feel like that's going to be engaging or human-centric or looking at what can the individual contribute. I imagine if you turned up at one of these organizations and in your first few days were kind of questioning why you have to put that box there or move that, you probably by Friday wouldn't be employed anymore. But so it does feel like that it's almost like the wrong type of work is now available, or at least the way by which organizations might go around filling that work are going to be wrong. So Rob, you mentioned the chart bar a bit, but do you want to expand about what do you feel it's going to take for this kind of societal change to kind of really sort of get some traction or get some grip?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm very unoptimistic about government policy-based change towards universal basic income. I know that in America and Canada, there have been some really interesting experiments, and they're continuing elsewhere in the world. But they're kind of experiments, and I think that although the ideal of universal basic income has a lot of merit, I don't think it's going to happen any time soon. So I think we have to think about transition income. And so the first thing that I think we're experimenting with is a sort of an idealized 6-month program to look at having funding for interventions with people to give them work and money over a 6-month period to enable them to really find their ground and be able to then transition into economic business cases that will sustain them forever. And Joelle and Sara have started working with us courtesy for a UK government grant, and they now graduated from that into the permanent workforce within Ethos. But we are still, as a team in Young Leaders, looking for the next month, the next quarter, the next year of justification of keeping the money for that team going, in the same way as any organization would need money for the staff of that organization. So there's some really quite interesting questions in terms of where that transition income comes from. It can come from government grants, and we're working with police forces and local governments and charities that kind of are looking to help disadvantaged people into work by giving them some, blocks of grants, etc. We're also looking at, we haven't done this yet, but innovative forms of financing. So there is something that is just started now in the UK that has happened in a number of countries already, called an income share agreement. So essentially it would allow that 6-month or more, maybe a year eventually, but certainly 6-month transition period to be funded, to give people money to live over a 6-month that would then be paid back without interest over 4 or 5 years after they've kind of got their business case. If they don't earn real money after, then they don't pay back anything. But it's essentially a interest-free loan to finance people to explore what that sustainable economic case would be. And I think that these models, which are not about social welfare providing money for work, but actually an individual's pathway being self-financed, if you like. So it's there isn't a working capital issue, if anybody's geeky. It's not that people are not they might just be transitioning into work, between work, one role to another. So I think that is what I wanted to say on transition income.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of kind of bringing about this change, again, I mean, Annabelle, is there some things that you might like to say about the efforts that Ethos are going to try and engage with employers to bring about some of this change, and particularly about drawing young people and young leaders into their organisation?
Yeah, I mean, I think our effort is to, use our Young Leaders platform to create, work opportunities, opportunities to create what we call a work package that people can engage with, and that's the starting point. We purposefully are not starting with the economic in certain instances, and we've already demonstrated at a small level that actually you can turn it on its what seems to be turning it on its head, because once you're there, you have done what you're doing, that then the realization that this is valuable is there for everybody to see, when it's a great engagement in that way. So I mean, it's a big change. In our wildest moments, I am wanting to understand why we pay people not to work instead of paying people to work. I want to blow up the benefit system and let's do some meaningful work, because there's lots that we could do. But that's in my wildest moments. But I mean, we're talking to, as Rob has mentioned before, any type of organisation that wants to engage with young people, and there's a mass. It feels like there's a sort of a tsunami of support for young people at the moment, and some of the comments in the chat. You know, it's like, it's really great to focus, you know, on young people. You know, cheesy, you know, they are the future, you know, but children are the future. But yeah, so I mean, we're working hard to create work opportunities with anybody who is looking to, you know, support our Young Leaders platform. That's what we are. That's what we're doing, and that's a lot of our time we do on a daily basis, and that can be anything from you know, I am a small organisation, I am a charitable organisation, I need to be doing, you know, I have a piece of work to run a marketing campaign or something like that, and so we will bring that person into our, you know, the person who needs the work to be done will come into our platform. They will be part of our network, part of our work system, and then we'll work with young leaders to work out who is able, who wants to engage with that. And it may be one or it may be 5 people to do that. So that's sort of how, and you know, you can replace small charitable organisation with large charitable or large organisation or membership organisation or whatever it is, you know, public sector or anything. It works for everything. Yeah, I mean, is that what you, Bill? Is that what you wanted?
Yes. Yeah. It's not what I want, Annabelle. It's what the
course,
world wants to hear.
Yeah.
It's what our global forum is kind of looking to have.
Fair enough.
So let me kind of be a bit provocative then and say what. So how do you respond to an accusation that young leaders is only for the privileged few? That you've got to be a well-educated master's distinction graduate with access to a laptop and a roof over your head, sort of thing. Is there, if we're talking about democratized workflows, then presumably you feel this has got wider application. Yeah, Rob.
So we're suckers for punishment. So we are now launching a number of experiments for the hardest to reach. You know, the jargon in the UK is people from furthest from the labour market. So these would be digitally excluded, ex-offenders, you know, people with criminal records, you know, people who the system, 16 to 24, 25-year-old, been excluded from education, you know, that transition, but, you know, that would be from 16 to 17, 18, where we still want to educate people, whether that is apprenticeships or non-vocational qualifications, but they're bouncing away from that. So we're working with local authorities and charities and the police force on now using what we've experimented with the last 30 or so, 35 young leaders to people who do not come from the Russell Group, you know, master's degree or, you know, we have people on the platform who don't have degrees, who have been home educated, who are currently outliers on the system. But I acknowledge that we're very much at the starting point, Bill, and watch this space, no doubt some pain, but hopefully also some pleasure over the next year or so as we look not exclusively to people who are hard to reach, because we want to create mixed communities. So one of the police forces in the UK, in fact, 2 police forces in the UK have things called violence reduction units that we're working with. And in one, we're looking at a mixed cohort of young leaders where we would be taking ex-offenders and people on the edge of criminality into the workplace and mixing those with Sarah's and Joelle's and local people who might be ambassadors and help to navigate people who have run into problems through a sort of knowledge work environment. And in Scotland, we're looking at the first few young leaders being not from the criminal justice system, but people like Sara, who we can then build a community to help the police's violence reduction capability, then engage with people harder to reach than some, graduates and people with more, privilege or opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Sorry, just to interrupt you. I think it's really important, that mixed cohort thing, because young people want people to be inspired, and they're very much more inspired by people that they can relate to. And I think that's something we've learnt with our young leaders, is that they want to, they want to be like other people like them, that gives them encouragement that they can achieve, rather than working with old idiots.
So if we're, another interruption, if we're recruiting, it's not Annabelle and I who are running the bulk of the interviews, but it would be people like Sara or Joelle, or so the engagement with young people is not old people like me. It is, peer to peer. And I think that, we have to listen, even if we don't want to our young people, because they've got the voice that, they tell it, well, look, okay, this is not working. Then they get to choose the processes or how we engage, because the young people have to be the engine room. We're nothing without our young people in an organisation called Young Leaders.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very much young leaders for young leaders. It's young leaders building young leaders. It's young leaders helping other young leaders. I also just want to, I realize I'm very much in that sort of privileged position, and I'm very, very conscious of it. But I do want to, I think a lot of young people want to help bring up everyone else around them. And I also think it's really important to remark that it's important not to underestimate people, because we've had some really fantastic people in the Young Leaders program, and they're not anything, they're like Rob touched upon, they might have been homeschooled, or they might have been young parents, they might have disabilities, or so many different factors that might have might see as a problem into getting into work. That has actually been no problem whatsoever. And actually, it's just young people are very much not just unemployed, they're underemployed, and they just need more confidence. They need people to actually not underestimate them, because as soon as you give them the chance, and if you're having them actually be with people who want to help support them, and especially if they're young people, because again, who wants to listen to old people personally? It is such a more positive thing. And yeah, you can't just presume because someone from a different specific economic background or whatever is not able to do a job. It's just about giving them that support and not underestimating them.
Okay. Well, thank you for rising to the challenge that I put to you there, all three of you. I would say that age is a matter of perspective. My 94-year-old mother, the world's population are mostly younger than her, and everyone she describes as that young person, even if they're 80, they're young, as far as she's concerned, and I totally understand that. So yes, I think you've responded, Rob, in the chat there to some useful links if people want to learn more about the Young Leaders Programme and the work with the violence reduction units. Then information's on the Ethos website for people to pick up. And I imagine if you want to make direct contact for even more information, then that would be most welcome. I'm going to move towards one of our, perhaps picking up Sunita's question, which is around leadership. What leadership do we think is going to be kind of most effective in essentially the new normal workplace that we've entered into post-COVID, or maybe we were moving in that direction even before the pandemic. So let's ask the most important leader on the call first, Sara. What do you feel is the kind of types of leadership that you would want to see as we move into these new ways of working and this new post-lockdown era?
I suppose the idea that anyone can be a leader, that there isn't any sort of traditional, there's the leaders and the followers. There are people who are quite happy not speaking out loud and taking control in that way, but just sort of that understanding of the variety of leaders that there can be, and that it shouldn't just always be one person who's in charge and they're always in charge. The reason that we are all called young leaders, we have the young at heart, young leaders as well, of course. I personally think I'm an old at heart person, but that's besides the point. And I think looking at like our various cohort, you probably wouldn't go, oh yeah, that person, they seem like the traditional leader, because they're not wanting to like talk and command a room and everything like that. But that doesn't mean that people don't have ideas that can lead change, if that's making sense.
Yes, definitely. I suppose from my kind of perspective, what we've been talking about, and indeed perhaps what the whole global forum on this issue is seeking to discuss, is how you create the environment for a democratized workplace. And that has got to be by those who are leading that workplace, or how those who are in a position of power, if not leadership, are creating the environment for a democratized workplace. So in terms of the way in which you would sort of see, leadership style or leadership involvement going forward, I mean, Rob, what's your thoughts on that question of what would you like to see in the future workplace?
So yeah, I think it's a fascinating subject, fascinating question. The L word, the leadership word. And I mean, variously, we talk about it in a million books and subjects like servant leader. But I think that in a democratized workspace, you can kind of think of the social context as everything. So a sort of a mesh, a network of relationships. So rather than, wiring diagrams and hierarchies, somebody may be in a board or a position of authority, but actually their behaviors, their actions on a day-to-day basis mean so much when you view the world as a network of social relationships. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're a chief executive or a chief constable or a general, a fun run is going to be a brilliant fun run if your boss or the chief is leading with their behavior by getting out there and not standing behind everybody and going, yeah, oh, great. So really it's not about making decisions and being in meetings, it's just doing stuff. And that's what leadership is about, what you do, not what you say, period. I don't think many people kind of do that. I don't see many leaders that do lots of doing. I see lots that do lots of telling.
Okay.
That's quite brutal.
No, well, hey, let's cut to the chase on these things. Annabelle, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always in my mind is, this permission to just get on with stuff. That is important for me, and something that I would try and encourage across any organisation with any people, that actually you get, it is the way forward. So let's do some stuff, as Rob says, and have permission to do it.
So adding some, I suppose, kind of my reflections then, and if you have, other views you can add, then please do so. But, some of the other styles of leadership, and you've mentioned them kind of, Rob, but a kind of word that I used to hear very often throughout my kind of career was grip. And it was often used as something that was felt to be positive and required, and when something went wrong, it was because there was a lack of this thing that it went wrong. So where was the grip around this? And there was a lack of grip in this organization or this area or this event or this thing, and that led to kind of problems, which is a kind of explicit and also kind of deeply subliminal message that says you need a hierarchy, you need a power distribution that is top down, you need checking and rechecking, and you need to have a lot of grip. almost the antithesis of a democratized workplace where actually it's about collective and individual ownership of solutions and problems, and that, you know, to generating a very different environment, almost implicitly is looking towards a kind of lack of centralized grip. And I think that's a real issue, because you see in many organizations, you know, I see it in the kind of corporate world with directors. I see it in government. I see it in the public sector, that there is still a pervading view that leaders are there to exhibit grip, as opposed to being there to create an adult environment in which people can flourish and own the solution to the problems that they face. And that's a fairly fundamental issue that we all kind of need to look at, to address, if we are truly to bring about the theme of this this discussion and this conference and this way of engaging. Then something has to change within that world. I wondered what your thoughts were around where some of the focus of ethos might be, particularly, say, the Young Leaders Programme, because over the course of this last, you know, hour and 20 minutes, it struck me that if we are to bring about this change, then some of the effort needs to go into changing recruitment departments, HR departments, HR directors, chief executives, to say, actually, you know, you need to be recruiting differently. You need to, you know, gear up your system not to try and put a round peg into a round hole. You need to recruit a peg and let it develop its own hole that it's going to fit into, and that is what you need to be doing. Is there something about the approach going forward that, having had this chance to kind of discuss some of the themes, that you might now be reflecting on and thinking, actually, maybe I need to put some effort here or more effort there, or, you know, what are you kind of taking away from what we've just been discussing? So I don't know, Sara, you're thinking, and Rob's got his hand up, so he's jumped in. So on you go, Rob. You know, what are you thinking?
I think you have to blow up everything and recognise that, and Annabelle will speak forever about HR departments, you know, because the workforce design system, you know, is designed to recruit the round pegs into round holes, and HR, you know, bless it as a function, is kind of executing a corporate mission, whether that's, you know, doing you know, disposing of people who are no longer required, or hiring idealized, you know, model workers into, you know, a cultural norm that somebody's decided that this shelf stacker is going to fit this psychometric profile for my organization, because that, so we need to yes, we do, is the short answer. We need radically different processes, but you couldn't just change HR if you didn't change the work system for you know, what it's like to be a worker in any organization. And that it really is the job description that needs to be changed, and that's not really HR that does that. It's the stakeholders who are involved in delivering, managing, and, you know, getting involved in doing the work. It is that is really the root of the root cause, is the, you know, how work is done at the moment. Again, brutal, but
okay. No. Thank you, Rob. Annabelle, anything you want to kind of add to that reflection on, you know, what has this stimulated you to think of?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, as Rob said, I'm always trying to blow up HR. You know, that it you know, there are many great things that HR, you know, does, but actually its focus is organisational rather than individual, which is my big problem. But I mean, I agree with Rob. You know, it's unsurprisingly, having worked together for such a long time, that we need to. You know, it's got to pervade throughout everywhere. It's a mega mission that we're on, to bring about some change in how people can be put back at the centre of what they're doing and their work. It's why we ask the question why first, because if we can't get alignment on why in some way, and you referred to this, Bill, then it's probably never going to work because we won't have the right alignment. And there's no right or wrong why. You know, we happen to have 3 themes that are, you know, about social outcomes, this, that, and the other, you know, all good for us, pat on the back, doing great things, which we all love. But, you know, if your why is I want to make loads of money and do something there, that's fine too. There's no judgment there. It's just, let's find the right, you know, where is the organisation that suits you, that will match you, that will bring you most happiness to achieve your why. So that's quite radically different to putting that square peg in the round hole. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Annabelle. And Sara, anything you want to add?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to destroy CVs because I think CVs are just the most horrible thing ever. And actually, yeah, having that idea of actually just talking to the person and understanding that person, the human side of things. Sadly, one thing we definitely don't have time to get into, but is something we're actually also very passionate about, and definitely Annabelle is super, super passionate about this, is the idea of flexible working. And that why I'm bringing that up now is because it's understanding that you can't just think about work as this sort of single entity sometimes. I think it's understanding how it interacts with people's lives and just understanding how the person fits within that and how the person fits within the work and their life and everything like that. And just sort of, yeah, looking at things a lot more holistically than just a sheet of paper that says that you've got 3 years experience doing this job that you might have hated. That should sum that up quite quickly.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, well, I'm going to just spend a minute summarising as I feel we're arriving at the end point of this particular session. I will give you the opportunity for the quick kind of 30-second pitch in terms of what you would like to say individually by way of conclusion. But generally speaking, first of all, what we've endeavoured to cover is 2 broad areas. One is what does ethos do? And we've talked about those 3 areas, the sort of place-based activity that takes place, the work around well-being with Team Army and Team Police, and then the Young Leaders Programme, developing individuals into contributing valuable people who are producing kind of good work, who enjoy it and who are therefore embarking upon a lifetime in the world of work, and as Sara, as you said, intrinsically linked to their own world of life. The 2 are indivisible. We also talked about how ethos does that, and 2 kind of main parts to it: the central value exchange, which is a discussion that starts with the individual's why, a reflection on what motivates them and what they are seeking from the world of work. And then expanding that discussion to how the organisation can facilitate that and make that work, and including plenty of positive feedback to the individual about how well they're doing and about how they have embarked on their journey. And then the communication, how you facilitate all of this with communication platforms and ways of engaging, which are certainly human and person kind of centric. So a lot of ground covered over the last hour and a half. But if I just give you 20-30 seconds each just to kind of summarize anything else that you wish to add, and if I start with you, Rob, and then Annabelle, and then Sara, and Joelle, if there's anything that you want to add, you can obviously just raise your hand, as you said earlier. So Rob, first of all.
I think moving forward, young people in the workplace everywhere in the world is hugely important, and we, through young people, have got an unprecedented opportunity to implement the vision of democratized workplaces. So the call to action from me is get in touch with Ethos, whatever your interest in democratized workplace. Let's continue the conversation after today. If you found it interesting, we've already started conversations now, and I look forward to speaking to everybody over the coming weeks.
Thanks, Rob. Annabelle, you've got your video for 20 seconds.
Yeah, does that mean I get in a minute? No, so for me, it's about, I want everybody just to allow themselves, sounds a bit cheesy, but to think differently. Because I think if everybody just allowed themselves to accept that we could do things differently, that then that's the starting point. It's never as easy as that, of course. And also, I want people to think about what we've talked about value exchange, and how one can apply that to one's life. It's a magical. We talked about earlier. It has been referred to as cathartic, and it's just a thought process. It's a discussion about what you're doing in your life. And as with Rob, I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in discussing that and how that works much further. Do just get in touch.
Thank you. It's just turned 11 o'clock. Sara, finally to you.
Yeah, I'll make that very less than 30 seconds. So yeah, thank you everyone who's actually come and listened to us for an hour and a half. I'm quite impressed. And yeah, every single great thing we've done is always started from conversation. So please drop us. I mean, you can drop us an email. We'll quickly move it away from emails, I promise. But yeah, like I said, everything we've ever done has always started from great conversation. So please get in touch.
Okay, and as Sara said, thank you to everybody who's joined us over the course of the last hour and a half. Thank you to Rob, Annabelle and Sara for your kind of really insightful contributions, and Joelle, thank you for doing the technical moderation today, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the Global Forum. Thank you very much.
And before we go, thank you, Bill. Hugely brilliant job independently moderating this rabble here. So thank you on behalf of Ethos and everyone here for making this possible.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bill.
Joelle, is there anything we need to do in terms of closure?
No, I think we could all just leave and it should be fine.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Bye-bye
Thank you
then.
very much, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Bye.
bye.